1971, a secret society predicted 3 world wars in a detailed letter. The First World War was to allow the society to overthrow the powers of the Tsars in Russia. The conflicts between the British and the Germanic empires were to be used to instigate this war. The Second World War was to be instigated by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. The aim was to destroy Nazism and make political Zionism strong enough to establish a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. The Third World War would be between the political Zionists and Islam. The goal was for the war to be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism would mutually destroy each other, while other nations would be forced into the conflict until they were fully exhausted. In the aftermath, a social cataclysm greater than anyone has ever known would occur.
The FBI just released a warning saying that it has received a broad and credible threat to synagogues in New Jersey. This coming on the heels of a sharp rise in anti-Semitism that we've been seeing in the US the last few weeks. But anti-Semitism in America has actually been on the rise for years now. According to the Anti-Defamation League, in 2021, there were more than 2,700 incidents of assault, harassment, and vandalism against Jewish people in America. That's actually a 34% increase from incidents like that in 2020. And in the last few weeks, the US has seen an even sharper increase in anti-Semitism that's coming from a very unlikely source: Black celebrities. Rapper Kanye West has been in the news nonstop lately because of the anti-Semitic rants he's been going on. And there's a reason why those rants cost him billions of dollars in wealth and nearly every business contract he had. It's because he has a lot of influence. And when influential people like this say things like this, it leads to incidents like this, which in turn leads to threats like this. And Kanye isn't the only one. NBA star Kyrie Irving has also contributed to this recent rise in anti-Semitism. He went on Twitter and promoted a film that basically calls European Jews the synagogue of Satan.
Were you apologizing or did you not apologize?
I didn't mean to cause any harm. I'm not the one that made the documentary.
To know their own name. Why? Because he took it away from them. Please. 20 million black people don't even know their own language. Why? Because he took it away from them. 20 million black people who don't even know the history of their ancestors. Why? Because he took it away from them.
And it's really sad to see two prominent and talented African-American men falling for such BS. And I really don't think that either of them understand the full scope of what they're doing and how it leads to threats like this. But what do you all think of this story, and how can we better combat anti-Semitism in America?
Kyrie Irving did not make, he has to answer for. Could you imagine a world in which everything you watch, right, you are somehow now responsible for every single word within it? Notably absent, by the way, is the press going up to Jeff Bezos, who is the owner of Amazon, who runs Amazon, and saying, hey, why did you allow this documentary to be on Amazon? There's no outcry. There's no everybody delete your Amazon accounts because of this documentary. They are putting this firmly and squarely on Kyrie Irving, which is problematic in the first place. It's ridiculous that they would say that he is unfit to be associated with. He very clearly condemns the falsities in the movie. He clarifies that he's not anti-Semitic after he talks about the Oxford Dictionary. So here is the definition of Semitic straight from the Oxford Dictionary. It's relating to or denoting a family of languages that includes Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic, and certain ancient languages such as Phoenician and Akkadian, constituting the main subgroup of the Afro-Asiatic family. The second definition listed is relating to the people who speak Semitic languages, especially Hebrew and Arabic. Clearly, what Kyrie Irving is saying, based on that definition, is that he believes that he is Semitic. His feedback is, do not make the word Semitic just about Jewish people in America. It includes a lot of other people, okay? Now, you might disagree with that. You might disagree with the Oxford Dictionary definition, but you can't be mad at him for stating the actual Oxford Dictionary definition. And I want to say this really from the heart, because there was so much pressure that was put upon me to condemn Kyrie Irving, right? To condemn Kyrie Irving based on this press conference, to basically decide that his pain is irrelevant. When I watched this press conference, I felt Kyrie's pain.
Jewish college students right here in America say they're feeling scared and threatened after an increase in anti-Semitic threats. Now, this is playing out right now at Cornell University. A student was arrested in connection to making anti-Semitic threats on an online forum. I read those comments. They were very disturbing. Campus police ended up camping out essentially outside of a Jewish center there on campus. The governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, she visited with Jewish students on Cornell to offer her support. This as the FBI and so many other agencies are reporting that they are getting more reports of hate crime threats against Jewish, Arab, and Muslim communities.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 6090 is designed to combat the deeply disturbing trend of anti-Semitic harassment in schools, colleges, and universities across the country. We're seeing it unfold right now on our television screens. Anti-Semitic harassment on these university campuses is unfortunately not a completely new phenomenon. As early as 2005, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights warned that campus anti-Semitism had become a serious problem. The catalog of anti-Semitic harassment in America's top institutions of higher learning is there for everybody to see. Those incidents have increased sharply following the October 7, 2023 terrorist attacks in Israel perpetrated by Hamas and its allied groups. In late October 2023 at Cooper Union in New York, visibly Jewish students were forced to shelter inside a library as pro-Palestinian protesters tried to gain entry, banging on doors and windows with the purpose of terrifying them. On October 26, 2023, anti-Israel protesters assaulted multiple Jewish students at Tulane University in New Orleans. From October 7th until mid-January of 2024, the Department of Education has launched 51 investigations into complaints alleging discrimination based on actual or perceived shared ancestry in K-12 schools and colleges and universities. From January 16, 2024 until today, the department has launched over 45 investigations into schools and colleges. These investigations overwhelmingly concern anti-Semitic conduct in these schools. In fact, on April 23, 2024, the Education Department launched an investigation into Columbia University, and we all know what's happening there right now.
Members of the NYPD are confronting these anti-Israel protesters. Viewer discretion is advised. You also see this NYPD officer furling up a Palestinian flag. Maybe not. Okay, you just saw there a chair. A chair was thrown. I'm not sure if you saw that. There, they are dismantling this tent encampment. You see, they're also arresting more and more of these students. All right, you can see there both of our vantage points now, one in the air, one on the ground, as these NYPD officers are arresting some of these pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli demonstrators. You see there many NYPD officers taking into custody some of these demonstrators who refuse to comply with NYU officials who wanted them to disperse. I've seen numerous anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses nationwide, but including and especially in New York, so much.
And it is time that we say clearly, it has always been leading us here. It is a false idol that has led far too many of our own people down a deeply immoral path that now has them justifying the shredding of core commandments. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not covet.
Zionism began as a project of evangelical Christianity long before Jewish intellectuals suggested the idea of creating a Jewish state in Palestine, and the motivation was anti-Semitic. In the vision of evangelical Christianity, could not have the end of time, the resurrection of the dead, the return of the Messiah, without the return of the Jews to Palestine. In the vision of evangelical Christianity, could not have the end of time, the resurrection of the dead, the return of the Messiah, without the return of the Jews to Palestine. But it created a good pretext to encourage the idea that the Jews should not live either in the United States or in Europe. So I used to call it the double bill for anti-Semites, because they get rid of the Jews and, so to speak, they get back the only Jew they want, which is Jesus Christ. This kind of group was very important among the British policymakers. Lord Balfour, who is behind the Balfour Declaration, was a very known anti-Semite. His greatest worry was that anti-Semitism in Russia would push hundreds of thousands of Jews into Britain. So he legislated in 1906 the Aliens Act in the British Parliament that was specifically meant to disallow refugees from Russia to come to Britain. Not surprisingly, when he began his connection with the Zionist movement, he saw even a better solution than trying by force to prevent Jews from Eastern Europe to come to Britain. It was better to reorientate them to Palestine. On top of it, he was told by British imperialist strategists that a Jewish Palestine would justify the integration or the incorporation of Palestine within the British Empire.
Of the Israeli government holding a private convention here in the United States. One of the people in attendance at this secret meeting was Judith Varnai Shorer. She's a former Israeli consul general who was operating out of Atlanta. She was one of the main people saying that the biggest problem that they had was young black people in the United States. But don't worry, they've got some black leaders on the payroll.
Jewish college students right here in America say they're feeling scared and threatened after an increase in anti-Semitic threats.
The FBI just released a warning saying that it has received a broad and credible threat to synagogues in New Jersey. This coming on the heels of a sharp rise in anti-Semitism that we've been seeing in the U.S. the last few weeks. But anti-Semitism in America has actually been on the rise for years now.
She was one of the main people saying that the biggest problem that they had was young black people in the United States. But don't worry, they've got some black leaders on the payroll.
The major problem of Israel is with the young generation of the black community. The problem of Israel is with the young generation of the black community. Black is with the young generation of the black community.
This was an Israeli government official who was saying this. Not some low-level operative or some rogue member of their diplomatic corps. This was a senior member of their administrative government who was saying this on American soil. Their biggest problem wasn't Hamas or Hezbollah or the Palestinian Authority or Syria or even Iran. She said that Israel's biggest problem was young black people in the United States.
The other day, somebody called me. They wanted to get some scriptures from me because I distribute in the UK and Europe. His Hebrew Israelite scriptures, Hebrew Old Testament, Hebrew Apocrypha, Hebrew New Testament. It's a great, great translation, and this is what we distribute in our blessed menorah. But they called me about this. They wanted to know about the information, and they had so many questions. They said they were alone, they have nobody to talk to, and they wanted some questions answered. I asked if I knew about the Sabbath and the feast. So I was educating them a little bit. They had so many questions. Then they asked me a question. They said, well, you know, we know that the true Jews are not the ones living in Israel. So who are the true Jews? And I told them the people who are black or melanated. And I give examples of that in Deuteronomy 28, etc., etc. And the manifestation that came out of these people was unbelievable. And they were a white couple. And they said to me this: they would rather believe a lie than accept that the children of the book and Mashiach is black. They would rather believe a lie than accept that the children of the book and Mashiach is black. That is an end-time spirit, a spirit of Esau manifesting in these last days, wrestling in the womb. So I turned around and said, well, look, you want the scriptures or not, it's up to you. But this is the truth, and, apologize for these things. She said to me, am I a rabbi? I said, I don't call myself rabbi, but I'm a teacher of the word.
This way, brother. You see, one of the words they just mentioned, Gushi. Well, they began calling us niggers, Sambo. Niggers, Sambo.
What's that? Who the kids just mentioned?
Yeah, the kids. They began saying Kushi, meaning niggers, Sambo.
So these kids are taught racism from their young then?
Yeah. They grow them up
to be racist.
Racism, discrimination. So imagine yourself to be
Between 1956 and 1971, the FBI ran a counterintelligence program named COINTELPRO that was initiated by J. Edgar Hoover. COINTELPRO mainly targeted civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King, and it's commonly understood that this was an abuse.
One that was in the Black Panther Party kind of understood it was a given that we would have wiretaps, that we would be followed, that we would be harassed, we'd be locked up, that we would even be beaten by the police.
In the winter of 1969, law enforcement agencies launched efforts to undermine an attempted coalition between the Black Panther Party and the Blackstone Rangers, a Chicago gang.
The Panthers were pursuing an ideology that said we need to take these young minds, this young energy, and turn it into part of our movement in terms of black liberation and the rest of it.
The major problem of Israel is with the young generation of the black community.
And I saw a very purposeful, intentional effort on the part of the police department to keep that head from hooking up to that body. It was like, do not let this thing become a part of what could ultimately be a political movement, because that's exactly what it was.
FBI agents wrote an anonymous letter to Jeff Fort, the leader of the Blackstone Rangers, warning Fort that the Panthers have, quote, a hit out for you, unquote. The Bureau knew that the information was false, but believed that Fort might take retaliatory action against the Panthers. Meanwhile, city officials announced a crackdown on gangs.
Would you say that street gangs can do no good? Is that what you would say?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think that the energy of youth properly directed could be a tremendous betterment, could lead to a tremendous betterment of our city and the individuals' progress themselves. I'm complaining about the misdirection. I'm complaining about the fact that 620 out of 693 shooting victims are black themselves. And I think that's a tragedy. That is where black genocide is occurring here.
The Chicago police expanded their anti-gang campaign to include the Black Panther Party. In late May, Fred Hampton was sent to prison. He had been convicted on a charge of stealing $71 worth of ice cream bars.
We tried to develop negative information to discredit him, just like we did everybody else. We, meaning the FBI, I tried to come up with signs of him doing drugs or something, and never could. He was clean. He was dedicated. I've had private conversations with him. We got along pretty well.
While Fred Hampton was in prison, a police raid on the Panther office turned into a shootout. 5 policemen and 3 Panthers were wounded.
They did it. After they got the brothers down, they went back up there and the fire started.
Nobody was up there except the police when the fire started.
Right. Frank, you want to come get a picture of that dude? Yeah, check that door out, man. Magnified shotgun.
Shot up the door at the office there, arrested some Panthers. And just to show you the nature of the raiding officers there, they burn boxes of cereal that we had on the 3rd floor. When they deliberately set fire to that. They didn't set fire to the 2nd floor. They set fire to the 3rd floor with all the, that was kind of indicative of what they were thinking and how they were moving.
Let's talk about this video that's been going around.
Be very careful of what you say about Israel. Any believer going against Israel, you are making yourself an enemy against God.
As we continue to deconstruct and decolonize religion and spirituality, I really want people to take the time to think more critically. Because if you're standing with Israel because you don't want to be an enemy of God, right? What happens when Israel blows up churches and kills Christian Palestinians living in Gaza? The media and many of your pastors have done a great job convincing you that this is a religious war, that it's God's chosen people Israel versus Muslim terrorists. And this is a profoundly distorted view that glosses over the fact that the nation state of Israel, the one established in 1948, the settler colony, is not the Israel of the Christian Bible. This view also glosses over the Nakba and the decades of colonial violence, displacement, and ethnic cleansing. But if you hold this view, what do you think God's judgment is against Israel when they blow up churches and kill your fellow siblings in Christ?
These are families with children. Most of them are women. People went there because they thought this is the safest place they could go to. There is no other safe place, they thought, in Gaza. But now they discover there is no safe place in Gaza at all.
Do Palestinian lives, Arab lives not matter to God? And this is why I talk about the religion of white supremacy and white evangelicals in America. It's why I continue to pose questions like, is the black church anti-black? It is because white supremacist framing continues to show up in American evangelical theology, or God talk. Just take a look at this video.
The settler colony state of Israel just bombed one of the oldest churches in the world, the Greek Orthodox Church of St. Porphyrios in Gaza. This church is over 2,000 years old, and it was sheltering over 500 Palestinian Muslims and Christians seeking safety from Israel's ongoing airstrikes. But that did not stop the Zionist regime from bombing them and killing over 40 Palestinians. You would think that white Christians would identify with these Christians who were just killed and associate with these Christians who were massacred in a Christian church. Like, these are your fellow brothers and sisters in Christianity who were killed. But somehow they still continue to defend and stand with the settler colony of Israel. Why would they not identify with these Christians? Because they're not white Christians. These are Arab Christians, brown Christians. It doesn't matter that they were killed because they're not white.
Stop right there. He said it. Whether you consciously realize this or not, the difference in treatment for Arab Christians, your siblings in Christ, is their culture, is their skin color. It is an internalized reality. And it brings back the point for me of divine racism, which I've talked about on here. Because there's a clear distinction being made about who God's chosen people are, and the kind of suffering that we're okay with these different groups enduring. Let's revisit. So let's talk about Dr. William R. Jones and divine racism. In 1973, former Yale and FSU professor Dr. William R. Jones wrote a book that dealt with black suffering from a theological perspective. And in it, he coins a term called divine racism. His book is entitled, Is God a White Racist? And it's not meant to be a gimmick. It is a racial reframing of the question of theodicy, which is again the kind of theology that wants to question, interrogate, or defend the goodness and justice of God in the face of the existence of evil. There are 5 traits of divine racism as outlined by Dr. Jones. Let's talk about it. The first trait of divine racism is that it presupposes a basic division of mankind into an in-group and an out-group. A division supported, initiated, or sanctioned by God himself. Dr. Jones writes, in sum, God does not value all men equally. Consequently, he treats them differently. And this difference is not accidental, but central to his will and purpose. It is the white Christian binary of the saved and the unsaved. The morally upright versus the morally evil.
If you call yourself a believer of Jesus Christ, a follower of Jesus Christ, you should be praying for what God loves and praying against what he hates, especially concerning Israel.
Which brings me to point 2 of divine racism, which is that the outgroup suffers more than the rest of the population. The third trait of divine racism is that God is responsible for the imbalance of suffering that separates the in and the out groups. The fourth trait is that God's favor or disfavor is correlated with the racial or ethnic identity of the group in question. And we conclude with trait number 5, which says that God must be a member of the in group. Thus, under the understanding of divine racism, God must be white. So what do we do with the fact that our government leaders have prayed to and thanked God for policies that negatively impact black people and other marginalized groups? Or those who view the taking of rights as God's will? Or those who view their work in this regard as them living up to their callings as Christians and public servants? To me, it begs the question that William R. Jones posed in 1973. Pay attention. Pay attention to what the theology that you espouse says about yourself, about your God, and about other people. Because the roots of these issues and your indifference towards marginalized groups is showing up in your God talk. Thank you for watching, and as always, like and follow for more content.
after I liberate the Jewish people, I will go to Africa to help liberate the black people.
Video footage of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talking about Israel's goals for Africa in a press conference in Uganda has many on the continent speculating what those plans and goals are. Will Africa be Israel's next target after they completely dominate Palestine?
I'm sorry, what the hell did he just say, you damn squatter? You wanna... I swear to God, you can't make this up anymore. So after you free and liberate the Jews, you gonna go over to Africa and free our black brothers and sisters? Okay, what's going on here? Black Soldiers Saga highlights racism in Israel. Israel's self-proclaimed racist politician nominated as New York Consul General. May Golan has insulted Africans in Israel. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, wait. Israeli rabbi under fire for calling black people... What the fuck is going on? Being black and Jewish Ethiopians bear the brunt of Israeli state racism. Racism in Israel. Reports of anti-African race riots in Tel Aviv in May finally broke Western media silence over one of the most contentious... This is getting crass. Hold on. Racism is everywhere in Israel, even at anti-Netanyahu protests, Ethiopian Israeli activist says. Black lives do not matter in Israel. Wait. Israeli state and religious authorities' racist attitudes towards African refugees may have... But tell me again, Netanyahu. You're gonna free who in Africa?
Zionism began as a project of evangelical Christianity. Long before Jewish intellectuals suggested the idea of creating a Jewish state in Palestine, and the motivation was anti-Semitic. In the vision of evangelical Christianity, could not have the end of time, the resurrection of the dead, the return of the Messiah, without the return of the Jews to Palestine. But it created a good pretext to encourage the idea that the Jews should not live either in the United States or in Europe. So I used to call it the double bill for anti-Semites, because they get rid of the Jews and, so to speak, they get back the only Jew they want, which is Jesus Christ. This kind of group was very important among the British policymakers. Lord Balfour, who is behind the Balfour Declaration, was a very known anti-Semite. His greatest worry was that anti-Semitism in Russia would push hundreds of thousands of Jews into Britain. So he legislated in 1906 the Aliens Act in the British Parliament that was specifically meant to disallow refugees from Russia to come to Britain. Not surprisingly, when he began his connection with the Zionist movement, he saw even a better solution than trying by force to prevent Jews from Eastern Europe to come to Britain. It was better to reorientate them to Palestine. On top of it, he was told by British imperialist strategists that a Jewish Palestine would justify the integration or the incorporation of Palestine within the British Empire.
1871, a secret society predicted 3 world wars in a detailed letter. The First World War was to allow the society to overthrow the powers of the Tsars in Russia. The conflicts between the British and the Germanic empires were to be used to instigate this war. The Second World War was to be instigated by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. The aim was to destroy Nazism and make political Zionism strong enough to establish a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. The Third World War would be between the political Zionists and Islam. The goal was for the war to be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism would mutually destroy each other, while other nations would be forced into the conflict until they were fully exhausted. In the aftermath, a social cataclysm greater than anyone has ever known would occur.
They would rather believe a lie than accept that the children of the book and Mashiach is black.